Hope is a dangerous thing. After 12 hours adrift in the South China Sea, the gray light of dawn felt like a promise of rescue. Myself and two other survivors, Garcia and Miller, clung to the wreckage, exhausted but alive. "They'll be looking for us now," Garcia whispered, his voice cracked from salt and fear. "We just gotta hang on." He was wrong. Something massive and powerful slammed into the wreckage from below, throwing us against the twisted metal. Before we could even scream, Garcia was yanked under the surface, his cry choked off by the water. The sea around us erupted in a cloud of brilliant, horrifying crimson. We were left in stunned, horrified silence, and then we saw it. A few yards away, a dark dorsal fin, impossibly large, cut through the water, circling us slowly, deliberately. We had survived the crash. We had survived the night. But we were not going to survive the morning. For 5 days, our world had been a suffocating cage of green. The jungle. They called it the Green Hell, and it had earned its name 1,000 times over. We were part of the 1st Cavalry Division, and our 6-man long-range reconnaissance team had been sent deep into enemy territory. Our job was to be ghosts, to find the enemy without being found. We had succeeded. We had completed our mission and we were heading home. The feeling inside that chopper wasn't just relief. It was a kind of rebirth. Every mile the helicopter put between us and that wall of green felt like a year of life being given back. The air was thick with the smells of our ordeal. Jet fuel, sweat, wet canvas, and the damp, earthy scent of the jungle that still clung to our uniforms like a shroud. We were packed in tight, a tangle of limbs, rifles, and rucksacks. Private Miller, a kid from Iowa on his first tour, was staring out the open door, his eyes wide, as if he couldn't believe the world was so big and blue. He was just a boy, really. We all were. He shouted over the noise of the rotors to Corporal Garcia, who was sitting opposite him. Miller's face, which had been a mask of tense focus for 5 days, was now split by a wide, delirious grin. "First thing I'm doing when we get back is sleeping for a week," he yelled, his voice hoarse. "Or maybe I'll just live in the damn shower. I swear to God, I think I've got leeches in places I didn't know I had." Garcia, a tough but good-natured NCO from Boston, the kind of guy who could find a reason to laugh even in hell, threw his head back and let out a booming laugh that was barely audible over the engine. "Forget that, Miller. I'm writing a letter to my girl telling her I'm never complaining about her cooking again. After 5 days of sea rations, I could eat a boiled boot and call it a steak. And then a cold beer. A whole case of cold beer." He looked at me, his eyes bright with the thought of it. A vision of paradise. "You hear that, Evans? First round's on me." I just smiled and gave him a thumbs up, my own body finally unclenching from the constant tension of the patrol. I leaned my head back against the vibrating bulkhead. The cool, rushing wind from the open door felt like a gift from God, washing away the stench of the jungle and the lingering taste of fear. I looked out at the vast, peaceful ocean below us. It was a world away from the suffocating green cage we had just left. The water was a brilliant sapphire, the sun glinting off its surface in a million tiny diamonds. I closed my eyes just for a moment, allowing myself to feel a sense of pure, unadulterated relief. We had made it. We were safe. That was when the world exploded. A sudden, deafening series of cracks echoed through the helicopter, a sound like a giant tearing a sheet of metal in half. Heavy machine gun fire from a hidden Viet Cong position on the coast we had never seen. My eyes snapped open just in time to see a line of red tracer rounds stitch across the sky towards us. Impossibly fast, the first bullets ripped through the thin aluminum skin of the helicopter, with a sound like 100 hammers hitting an anvil all at once. Our door gunner, a quiet kid we all called Chief, slumped over his M60, a dark stain blossoming across his chest, his last burst of fire going wild into the empty blue sky. The pilot screamed a curse over the intercom, his voice a sound of pure panic that cut through the engine's roar. "We're hit! We're hit! I'm losing power! Mayday! Mayday! We're going down!" The helicopter lurched violently, tilting onto its side like a wounded bird. The serene blue of the ocean was replaced by a dizzying, sickening, spinning blur of sky and water. We were weightless, a chaos of bodies and equipment thrown against each other in a brutal metallic pinball machine. I felt a searing, white-hot pain in my shoulder as a piece of shrapnel tore through the fuselage and into my flesh. The comforting, rhythmic roar of the rotors devolved into a terrifying, high-pitched scream of dying machinery. Through the chaos, I saw the face of Corporal Garcia, his eyes wide with a terror that I knew mirrored my own. I saw the pilot wrestling with the controls, a desperate, hopeless battle against gravity. And then through the open door I saw the water, rushing up to meet us with impossible, horrifying speed. The last thing I remembered was the deafening, final, cataclysmic sound of metal tearing apart as the Huey slammed into the South China Sea. And then, there was only a crushing weight and a silent, consuming darkness. Consciousness returns not like a light, but like a slow, agonizing tide, pulling you from a black and dreamless sleep. The first thing it brings is the cold. A deep, bone-aching cold that the warm waters of the South China Sea have no right to possess. A chill that seems to emanate from the crushing pressure of the depths below. Then comes the pain, a sharp, searing fire in my left shoulder where the shrapnel hit, and a dull, throbbing orchestra in my head that pounds in time with the waves. And finally, it brings the memory, the spin, the scream, the impact. I open my eyes. The world is a smear of black on black. No sky, no sea, just an endless, suffocating darkness. I'm in the water. The gentle, lapping waves a mocking cradle. My fingers are numb, but they are locked in a death grip around a large, overturned piece of the Huey's fuselage. A makeshift raft in a dead ocean. For a long time, I just float. My mind a blank, hollowed-out space. The shock is a merciful blanket, protecting me from the full horror of what has happened. But it doesn't last. Slowly, the training, the discipline, the instinct to survive begins to claw its way back. I take a mental inventory. I am alive. My legs work. I can feel them kicking weakly in the water. My right arm is strong. My left arm is a universe of pain, but it's still attached. I can hold on. But am I alone? I try to call out to see if anyone else made it. My voice comes out as a broken, saltwater-choked croak. A pathetic sound that the vast darkness swallows instantly. Garcia? Miller? Anybody? The only reply is the gentle, mocking slosh of the waves against the metal. The silence that follows is heavier, more terrifying than any explosion. It is the silence of absolute, final loneliness. I call out again, louder this time, my voice raw with a desperation that borders on a scream, a sound that rips through my parched throat. And then, I hear it. A weak, sputtering cough just a few yards away in the darkness. It's followed by a low moan of pain. Hope, a feeling I thought was dead, ignites in my chest like a flare. Who's there? I yell, my voice finding a new strength. Sound off. The voice that comes back is weak, but I recognize it. It's Miller, the kid from Iowa. Evans, is that you? I can't see anything. I think my leg is broken. Hold on, Miller. I'm coming. I start to paddle with my good arm, kicking my legs, pushing my piece of wreckage through the dark water towards the sound of his voice. I find him clinging to a smaller piece of debris, his face pale as bleached bone in the faint starlight, a dark gash on his forehead. As I help him onto my larger, more stable raft, another voice cuts through the night, this one stronger, laced with a familiar, cynical humor. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Thought you two were shark bait for sure. It's Garcia. He's alive. He's floating nearby, propped up on a section of the tail boom, his leg tangled in some wires, but he's alive. A wave of relief so powerful it almost makes me pass out washes over me. We are not alone. There are 3 of us. We can do this. We spend the rest of the night huddled together on the largest piece of wreckage, a small, cold, and miserable island of humanity in an infinite ocean. We mourn our lost friends, Chief, the pilot, the co-pilot, in a hushed, broken silence. We tend to our wounds as best we can. Miller is in shock, his body trembling uncontrollably from the cold and the pain in his leg. Garcia, despite a nasty-looking injury on his own leg, is the NCO again. He's the leader. He keeps us focused. He keeps us talking. He keeps us from surrendering to the despair that is circling us like a predator. He tears a strip from his own uniform to make a better tourniquet for my shoulder. He speaks in a low, confident rumble in the dark. We just gotta make it to sunrise, boys. Just make it to sunrise. When that sun comes up, the search birds will be in the air. They know our flight path. They'll find us. We just gotta hold on. He makes us talk. About home. About our families. About the first thing we're going to eat. Anything to keep our minds off the cold and the dark shapes that float in the water around us. We hold on. We shiver, we pray. And slowly, agonizingly, the black of the sky begins to soften into a deep bruised purple. Then a pale, sickly gray. The dawn is coming, and with it, for the first time, hope feels real. We survived the crash. We survived the night. We were going to make it. Hope is a dangerous thing. It makes you soft. It makes you forget where you are. For a few precious moments, as the sun climbed above the horizon and painted the water in hues of gold and orange, we allowed ourselves to hope. The warmth of the sun on our skin was the first good thing we had felt in what felt like a lifetime. We were cold, we were in pain, but we were alive, and a new day had come. Corporal Garcia, his face pale but his eyes bright with a renewed spark of life, pointed a shaky finger towards the sky. "See," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper but filled with conviction. "They'll be looking for us now. The whole damn air cav. Just gotta hold on, boys. Just a little longer." Miller, the young private, looked from Garcia to me, his eyes searching for confirmation. I gave him a weak nod, a lie I wanted to believe myself. "He's right, Miller. We just gotta hang on." We clung to that hope. We clung to it harder than we were clinging to the wreckage. Miller let out a choked cry of fear. What was that? Garcia, his eyes wide, scanned the empty water around them. "Debris," he said, though his voice lacked the confidence it had a moment before. Must be the rest of the chopper settling below us. "It's nothing, but it wasn't debris." It came again. A second impact, harder this time. A deliberate and aggressive shove that lifted our piece of wreckage a foot out of the water and slid it sideways. It was the movement of a living thing. Something big, and then it happened. Garcia, who was dangling his tired, injured legs in the water, let out a sudden, strangled scream. It wasn't a shout of pain, but a sharp, high-pitched cry of pure, unadulterated terror. His eyes went wide with a look I will never forget. He was yanked downwards with an incredible, irresistible force, his hands scrabbling uselessly at the slick, wet metal of the fuselage. For a split second, we saw his horrified face, his mouth open in a silent scream, and then he was gone, pulled under the surface in a violent, churning swirl of water. There was a brief, terrible thrashing just beneath us, a chaotic explosion of white water that rocked our makeshift raft. And then the blue-green water around us erupted in a cloud of brilliant, horrifying crimson. We were left in stunned, horrified silence, the only sound the lapping of the now red water against our raft. Garcia was gone, just gone, and then we saw it. A few yards away, a dark dorsal fin, impossibly large, broke the surface. It was a perfect gray triangle, cutting through the water with a calm, deliberate purpose. It circled us once, twice, a predator surveying its territory. It wasn't a mindless animal. There was an intelligence there, a cold, ancient cunning in its slow, confident movements. And then, as if satisfied with its morning's work, it slipped beneath the waves and vanished. The hours that follow are a special kind of hell. The sun, which had been a symbol of hope, was now a merciless enemy. It beat down on us, blistering our skin. Our throats were parched, our lips cracked and bleeding. The salt water stung my wound. We were two men, floating on a piece of scrap metal in an ocean that was 1,000 miles wide and 1,000 miles deep, and somewhere in that vast blue emptiness the monster was waiting. Miller finally starts to speak, his voice a low, despairing mumble. He just repeats the same words, his eyes vacant, staring at the spot where Garcia had disappeared. "It's still out there. I know it's still out there. It's waiting for us. I try to be the NCO, the leader. It's what Garcia would have done," I tell him, my own voice lacking any real conviction. "Stay strong, Miller. A Navy patrol will find us. They have to." But even as I say it, I know the odds. We are a needle in an infinite haystack. We are alone. The shark returns in the afternoon. This time it doesn't just circle. It begins its psychological torture. It will swim directly towards us, its fin a gray torpedo cutting through the water, only to dive deep at the last second, disappearing beneath our raft. We can feel its immense body, a mountain of muscle and cartilage, scrape against the underside of the fuselage, a deep grating sound that vibrates through our very bones. It's reminding us, I am here. I am in control. You are in my world now. Miller starts to lose it. He begins to sob, his body shaking. "It's toying with us. Why is it toying with us?" He screams at the empty ocean. I don't have an answer. I just grip the edge of the metal, my knuckles white, my eyes scanning the water, my mind racing. This isn't a normal shark. It's too big, too smart. The local fishermen back on the coast used to tell stories. Whispers of a kamap ting, a spirit shark. A great white so large and so old that they believed it was a demon, a guardian of the deep. We had laughed at their stories. I wasn't laughing now. The hunt was on and we were the prey. Time loses all meaning out here. There is only the sun, the water, and the waiting. The shark is gone again, but its presence lingers, a cold spot in the warm water. It has been hours. Miller is getting worse. The shock and the dehydration are taking him. He's no longer talking to me. He's talking to his little sister back in Iowa. He tells her about the farm, about the coming harvest. He promises her he'll be home for Christmas. I try to keep him grounded, my own voice a dry, rasping whisper. Miller, stay with me. Drink some water. I hold a piece of canvas that has collected a few pitiful ounces of rainwater to his lips. He pushes it away. He looks at me, but his eyes are seeing something else. It's so hot, Evans, he mumbles, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. I just want to feel the cool water, like the creek back home. Before I can stop him, he rolls over the edge of the fuselage, his hands and arms dipping into the ocean. See? He says with a childlike sigh of relief. It's so cool. I scream at him, my voice cracking with panic. Miller, no! Get out of the water! Get your hands out of the water! But it's too late. It happens faster than a thought, faster than a heartbeat. The water beside him erupts. The shark, which had been gone for hours, comes from nowhere. A gray explosion of teeth and power. It doesn't test. It doesn't circle. It strikes. Its massive head breaks the surface, its black, lifeless eyes fixed on its prey. The jaws, a horrifying cavern of serrated daggers, close around Miller's torso with a sound like a giant bear trap snapping shut. A sound of crunching bone and tearing flesh. Miller doesn't even have time to scream. He just lets out a single choked gasp. His eyes meet mine for a fraction of a second, filled not with fear but with a look of profound final surprise. And then he is gone, pulled under in a violent churning vortex of red water that stains the side of my raft. I am alone, truly alone now. Just me, the setting sun, and the monster that took my last friend. The hope I had clung to, the discipline, the voice of Garcia telling me to hold on. It's all gone, washed away in that final bloody wave. All that is left is a silence that is deeper and more profound than any I have ever known. And in that silence, something inside me breaks. But it isn't my spirit. It is the part of me that was still a scared kid from Ohio. The part that was hoping for a rescue that would never come. That part died with Miller. What is left is something else. Something colder, harder. Something the Army had spent a year building. A thing they had buried deep inside me and trained me to use only when all else was lost. A weapon. In the absolute darkness of my second night on the water, alone and adrift, my mission changed. It was no longer about survival. It was about vengeance. The fear was still there. A cold, heavy knot in my gut, but it was no longer in control. I was. The creature that had hunted my friends, the devil that was now hunting me, had made a mistake. It had left a witness. It had left a soldier. And soldiers don't just die, they fight back. The night was spent in preparation. The grief for Miller and Garcia was a hard, cold stone in my gut, but I pushed it down. There would be time for grief later, or there wouldn't. Right now there was only the mission. My training took over. A series of drills and procedures burned into my mind at Fort Benning. You are alone. You are compromised. You are facing a superior enemy. What do? You assess. You adapt. You overcome. Or you die trying. I was not a helpless survivor anymore waiting to be eaten. I was a hunter, and I began to prepare my battlefield. My first weapon was my mind. I forced myself to think, to analyze the situation like it was a tactical problem. The enemy was big, fast, and powerful. A direct confrontation was suicide. That meant I needed a trap. I needed an equalizer. And my world, this small floating island of debris, was my armory. My M16 was at the bottom of the ocean, but I was not unarmed. I still had my KA bar, the combat knife that never left my side. I pulled it from its sheath. In the faint starlight, the blade was a thin sliver of darkness. I ran my thumb along its edge, still sharp. It was a pathetic weapon to face a monster with, like trying to kill a dragon with a toothpick. But it was something. It was a symbol of my will to fight. My piece of wreckage was part of the helicopter's main cabin. As I felt my way across its slick, jagged surface, my hand brushed against a canvas pouch still tethered to a piece of the wall. A survival kit. With numb, clumsy fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else, I tore it open. Most of the contents were ruined, soaked with seawater. The medical supplies were a useless pulp. The emergency rations were a salty sludge. But at the bottom of the kit, in a sealed waterproof cylinder, was the one thing that could change the fight: a flare gun. And two 12-gauge flare cartridges. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a weapon. A real weapon. I broke open the flare gun. The mechanism was simple, crude, but it was functional. I unscrewed the waterproof container holding the flares. My hopes sank. One of the flares had a fine crack in its red casing. It was ruined, filled with water, its powder turned to paste. But the other one was dry. It was intact. I had one shot, one chance to send a signal for a rescue that wasn't coming, or one chance to send a message of a different kind. The idea began to form in my mind, a desperate, insane plan born from the core of every soldier's training. Use what you have. Turn the enemy's environment, their own weapon, against them. I had a flare, I had a knife, but I needed more. I needed the battlefield itself. I began to explore my small floating island again. I was no longer just clinging to it for survival. I was mapping it, learning its terrain. The piece of fuselage was about 10 feet long, a mangled mess of wires and torn metal. Still attached to it by a thick steel winch cable was a smaller piece of debris, a section of the tail boom, floating about 15 feet away. The cable was taut between them, a tripwire in the middle of the ocean. And then I smelled it again. The sharp chemical scent of JP4 jet fuel, stronger here than anywhere else. Trapped in a pocket of the wreckage near me was a ruptured auxiliary fuel bladder. It was still partially full, leaking a slow, steady stream of fuel onto the surface of the water. The gentle current was carrying it away from me, creating a thin, iridescent slick that shimmered even in the faint starlight. A river of fire, waiting for a spark. All the pieces were there: the knife, the cable, the flare, the fuel. The plan crystallized in my mind, suicidal and perfect. It would require perfect timing, a steady hand, and more courage than I thought I possessed. But as I sat there in the darkness, my knife tucked into my belt and the flare gun clutched in my hand, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard purpose. The devil of the South China Sea had started this hunt, but I was going to be the one to finish it. The third dawn was the longest. Every minute was an eternity. The shark was out there. I knew it. It was watching, waiting. The blood from my leg was a steady, rhythmic drip into the water, a constant, open invitation. My body was screaming in protest. My shoulder was a ball of fire, my head pounded, and a deep, soul-crushing weariness had set in. But my mind was sharp. The soldier in me was in command, running on a fuel of pure rage and adrenaline. This was my last stand. I had spent the last hours of the night refining my trap. I used a piece of torn uniform to create a small wick, which I soaked in the jet fuel and then carefully wedged into a crack in the fuselage, just above the waterline. This would be my point of ignition. I had moved my raft so the wind was at my back, ensuring the glistening river of fuel was drifting away from me in a predictable line, a fuse leading out into the open ocean. My kill zone was set. Now, I needed the bait. My own blood was a good start, but I needed to bring the monster in close to make it commit to a final, decisive attack. I needed to make it angry. I looked around at the dark water. The bodies of my friends were gone, taken by the current or by the shark, but one piece of debris floated nearby, a flak jacket torn and empty. It belonged to Garcia. I paddled over to it, my heart a heavy stone in my chest. I didn't want to do it. It felt like a desecration of his memory. But war is about making impossible choices. I grabbed the jacket and began to slap it against the surface of the water over and over, a loud, provocative sound in the quiet morning. I was knocking on the devil's door. It was. The fin appeared on the horizon, a black triangle against the dying light. This time there was no slow circling, no testing. It came straight for me, a gray torpedo of pure primal rage. This was the final attack run. I raised the flare gun, my hand surprisingly steady. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, absolute focus. Everything slowed down. The sound of the water, my own breathing, it all faded away. My entire universe was now just that onrushing fin and the small red cartridge in my hand. This was my last shot. Not just for my life, but for Garcia, for Miller, for all the men we had lost. I would not miss. The shark was 20 yards away. 10 yards. Its massive head began to rise from the water, the sea parting before it like a curtain. I saw its black, lifeless eyes, the scarred and pitted hide, the rows upon rows of serrated, triangular teeth as its cavernous mouth opened wide. It was a vision from hell itself. It lunged, its jaws aimed not at me but at the piece of wreckage, intending to shatter it, to throw me into its waiting maw. At that exact moment, as it lunged through the shimmering slick of jet fuel, I didn't aim for the water. I didn't aim for its body. I aimed for its mouth. I aimed for its throat. I aimed for the heart of the monster. I squeezed the trigger. The flare shot out with a loud hiss, a single brilliant red star in the twilight. It flew true. It sailed directly into the shark's open mouth and disappeared down its gullet. For a split second, a horrifying, surreal second, nothing happened. The shark's jaws were still closing in on me. And then, the world erupted in fire. A muffled internal boom was followed by a massive fiery explosion. The jet fuel on the water ignited in a whoosh of flame, and at the center of it, the shark itself exploded from the inside out. A brilliant orange and red fireball lit up the sky, momentarily turning night into day. The shockwave hit me like a physical blow, throwing me from the wreckage into the water. I was plunged into a world of chaos, of boiling water and burning fuel. My last thought before I blacked out was a strange one. I had done it. The grunt had killed the sea monster. Hours later, Specialist Evans was found by a U.S. Navy patrol boat, a lone survivor clinging to a piece of charred debris, drifting in and out of consciousness. The sailors who pulled him from the water were in a state of disbelief. They had been drawn to the area by the sight of a strange fire burning on the surface of the ocean. And floating in the water nearby, they found it. The massive, burned, and mutilated carcass of a great white shark, larger than any they had ever seen. Evans was the sole survivor of the helicopter crash. The official report stated that his comrades were lost at sea, and that he had suffered his burns when the helicopter's fuel ignited on the water after the crash. There is no official mention of a shark. It was a clean, simple story. But the unofficial story, the one told in hushed tones by the Navy sailors on that patrol boat, the one that spread through the fleet like wildfire, was very different. It was the legend of the lone army grunt, the kid from the 1st Cavalry who had fought and killed a demon shark with a single flare, a story that was too unbelievable to be true and too incredible to be forgotten. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around for the after action. A soldier's training is designed to make them adaptable, to teach them to use any tool at their disposal to defeat the enemy and survive. But that training is meant for a world of men, of rifles, and of predictable tactics. The story of Specialist Evans, while a work of historical fiction, taps into a deeper truth. What happens when a soldier is thrown into a battle that they were never trained for against an enemy that doesn't follow any rules? That's when instinct takes over. The primal human will to survive. Evans, the Army grunt, was out of his element. He was in the shark's world, the domain of the Navy. But he used his soldier's mind. He assessed the terrain. He gathered his weapons, he set a trap, and he used the enemy's own aggression against it. It's a classic story of David versus Goliath, a testament to the idea that ingenuity and courage can overcome even the most overwhelming physical odds. It's a story that reminds us that the title of warrior is not just about fighting other men. It's about facing the impossible, staring into the abyss and refusing to give up, even when you're the last one standing. Thank you again for listening. Your support for the channel is what keeps these explorations going. A huge thank you, as always, to my YouTube channel members. May God be with each and every one of you, no matter what you are dealing with. And I will see you in the next episode.